Good morning. Just wanted to check in with the folks here in the auditorium. It's a couple minutes after 10. I know you guys can hear me because I can hear this huge echo. For those of you who are on the phone, if you are on the phone, if you were expecting others to be with you, please let them know we had to set up a new WebEx number. It's a call-in number, so we'll see who we have on the phone, and we may need to wait a minute or two to get started just to make sure we've got everyone. Good morning, I'm Julie LaRock. This is a quarterly meeting of the Everglades Technical Oversight Committee. We have most of the reps here in person. Rebecca Gibble from the Refuge, Dan Crawford from the Corps, Donato from the Park, and Frank, are you on the phone? We have nobody on the, do we have anybody on the phone?
This is John Barquette. I'm on the phone. Good morning.
Hi, Mr. Barquette. Good morning.
Hi, this is Charles Sabonico, Council for the DEP. I'm on the phone as well.
I didn't quite catch that. That sounded like Charles.
Yeah, Charles DeMonico, Council for the DEP, and I'm on the phone as well.
Okay, thanks. And we're going to give Frank a moment or two to catch up and call in because we just had to change the call-in number. So I appreciate you guys.
This is Brooks Moore with the Corps.
Hi, Brooks.
Hey.
We're going to slow roll the intros till we get Frank, who I expect to call in.
Hey, Julie, I'm here. Just made it in. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Frank.
And Julie, I want to apologize once again. My intention was to be down there in person. We had an issue yesterday, and I apologize once again. So thank you for the flexibility.
No worries. We do our best here because I know that travel can be a little bit of a difficulty from time to time for folks. All right, so we've got all our reps here, and Mr. Barquette is here. Do we have, and I got Charles from DEP, and who else do we have on the phone from DEP? Anybody else? We've got a couple of DEP technical staff here in the audience. Okay.
This is Ed Smith from DEP.
Hi, Ed.
And Philip Madden, also with DEP, sitting in with Frank and Ed.
And I didn't catch that name. Could you please repeat it?
Yeah. Philip Madden.
Got it. I know we have a John Madden sitting in the office, in the auditorium here, so I'm like, okay. Anybody else from DEP? How about DOI? Nobody on the phone from DOI? Park Service? Anybody like that? Corps of Engineers on the phone?
Julianne, this is Judy Coleman from DOJ.
Hi, Judy.
Hi. The agenda has the incorrect access code for WebEx.
It does because we just had to change it because of a technical issue. So those of you that are on the phone and you're expecting other people to be on the phone, if you could kind of text or email them, that would be great. That was one thing we can't change very easily at the last second here this morning, unfortunately. So, anybody else from DOJ now that we've got Judy on the phone?
I'm not expecting anyone else, but I'll
Okay.
send this to them in case they want to be on.
All right, great, thanks. We've got Brooks from the Corps. Anybody else on the phone from the Corps? Anybody from US EPA on the phone? I know we tried to get the new call-in number out to a pretty large list of folks, but it's kind of hard to catch up, okay? Any other agencies represented on the phone? Anybody?
Nick Allman, USGS.
Who is that again?
Nick Allman, USGS.
Oh, great. Hi, Nick. Thank you.
And this is Kenny. This is Kenny Heyman with Florida DEP.
Good morning, Ken. Anybody else on the phone right now that wants to identify themselves? All right, why don't we get started, and if we end up needing to do another quick round of introductions in a couple of minutes, I guess we could do that. For those of you who are on the phone, you should be listening either from your computer or your phone, or not both. That would help us avoid any feedback and that kind of thing. And also, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'm typing when I'm listening into meetings, so you could mute your phone while you're doing that. With the exception of maybe some of the technical discussion, we'll take public comments at the end of the meeting. And we don't normally respond to public comments during the meeting, but we will try to get back to folks who have comments and questions. For those of you who actually made it here on this morning, there's a number of items posted out on the T.O.C. webpage. There is the agenda, which has the old Colin number on it. We've got the second quarter settlement agreement report, as well as the companion quality assessment report, and there's also an Excel spreadsheet with the data. We've also got refuge compliance table through the second quarter of 2019, provisional Shark River slough tracking, again through the second quarter of 2019, final Shark River slough tracking for water year 18, so that's probably a piece that's been there for a little while. Taylor Slough and Coastal Basins data tracking up through the second quarter of 19. And for Shark River Slough and Taylor Slough, both of those tracking tables include 2 or 3 compliance calculation methodologies. We've also got 2 presentations posted out there. John's presentation on the settlement agreement, and then Jim Riley's presentation on COP. And the draft notes from our last meeting, which was in June. So hopefully that gives everybody a chance to get oriented here this morning. Does anybody need to amend or change our agenda for today? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on. If you could take a look at the meeting summary for June 25th, if we could approve or adjust those as needed.
I got a question regarding the website. The posting for the video for the June meeting links us back to October's meeting. Is that just an error? Or?
Probably. I would just say thank you for pointing that out, and we'll get it fixed.
To give that credit to Dan.
Okay, thank you, Dan, for letting Donato know. No, I'm only kidding. And were you not able to find the June video? Is that kind of... All right, sorry about that, guys. We will find that and get that properly linked. As technology evolves, sometimes things get a little broken, so we need to work through that. Thank you. Any comments or anything on the meeting minutes from June?
Hey, Julie, this is Frank. I do not have any comments or edits to the meeting notes.
Is that like a motion to approve the notes?
Yes, ma'am, that's a motion to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I second.
Anybody opposed? All right, thanks a lot, you guys. I appreciate it. All right, let's move on to our next item is the second quarter settlement agreement report. John Madden.
Technology worked for me today, so I think everyone should see my presentation. Let me know if you need me to speak up or if I'm too loud up here as I adjust the microphone. There we go. So as Julie mentioned, I'm here to present the second quarter's settlement agreement report. which will add data from April through June of 2019 to the tracking that we're doing for the refuge and Everglades National Park areas under the consent decree. First, we have a summary slide with lots of information on it. Basically, the top section describes the refuge status for the individual months of April, May, and June. The long-term level, as we know, is derived from the mean stage. So the stage was in the range of 16.24 down to 16.04. In that stage range, we're only, out of the 14 sites, able to collect 12, 10, and 9 of the sites. The others were too dry to sample. But in all cases, the geometric mean concentration of those sites were lower than the computed long-term level for all 3 months. Shark River Slough, we have provisional data and results that are on a 12-month tracking basis. So these are the 12 months ending April, May, and June of 2019 with the respective flow volumes, and from those we derive long-term limits. So in this case, you can see in June, for those 12 months ending June, the limit and the flow weight mean concentration that was collected were very close. We have for method 1, which does not include any of the S356 flows, but does include the rest. The flow weight mean concentration was 8.9 and the limit was 9.0. Including all of 356 flows for method 2, we had a flow weight mean of 8.6 and a long-term limit of 8.7. So very close there. In all cases, the percent of sampling events greater than 10 part per billion observed was slightly less than the guideline. Taylor Slough coastal basins, same 12-month tracking, ending April, May, and June 2019. The concentrations for the flow weighted means have a long-term limit of 11. That's a constant fixed number. And concentrations were about 6.2 to 6.3 for method 1, which is just the 332D pump station and S18C. Then as we add some of the other features that have been added, slightly less than that actually, and I'll go into more detail when I'm in that section of the presentation. But we have a very low percent of samples that are greater than 10 parts per billion in those areas. So, and here we are in November. So as I go through each, I'll give a little what information we have provisionally for in the cases through September where we have data in these areas. Okay, so there's one revision recently to this slide. I just want to point out, if you downloaded from the website previously, the 6.9 part per billion was updated. There was just a number left over from the last presentation, so I apologize for that. But this shows a 36-month period, and for the refuge, we know that each month is tested against a long-term level. That long-term level is based on the stage, which is shown in the blue bars in the background, and those drive the long-term level, which is the red line, over time. So if we have any 2 monthly geometric mean sampling events that are greater than the long-term level in a 12-month period, then that results in an exceedance. We do not have that in this case, where you can see there are like 3 blue dots where the observed values are that intersect the long-term level. So on the overall, the average of all the collection during this period was 6.9, and the next slide indicates how far above or below the long-term level each of these monthly sampling events was. So we have the one that was just slightly 0.4 parts per billion above, and then on average we're about 2.9 part per billion below that long-term level over this 3-year period. And averaging 6.9. So the top 3 rows show where our compliance data is that I had mentioned, April, May, and June. We also have a preliminary data outlook that this data is still considered provisional. We'll include it in the next quarterly report, but for informational purposes is included here. We can see the stages rose above 16.3 to 16.6, and we collected at all 14 stations for July, August, and September. Geometric mean concentrations were all below the long-term level and fairly consistent, just above 7 parts per billion for the last 3 months. Okay, moving on to Shark River Slough. So this, I'll remind you, is provisional data. We end up, for our final compliance, using USGS provided approved data, which is available in April, March or April of 2020. We'll be able to get data through this water year. So as I mentioned, in the 12-month period ending June, very close on the fluid mean concentrations and the limits, within 1 part per billion on both methods. Looking ahead to the water year through September of 2019, the provisional results show that we're slightly exceeded the limit. So we have 2 methods that we're using right now that I described when I was on the summary slide, with and without 336 pumping. That actually provided a significant amount of volume this year. So the limit that was computed from those volumes was 9.7 for method 1 and 9.2 for method 2. And the fluid mean concentrations were 10.1 as compared to that 9.7 limit, and 9.4 for method 2 compared to the 9.2. Now, again, those are subject to data revisions at this point, and I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to start thinking about that. And as I go through the slides, there's a couple things I can point out that are included in this presentation that might be of significance for water year 2019. As a reminder, last year the limit was at its minimum 7.6, and our fluid mean concentration ended at 7.3, and you can see the history here. And since the long-term limit became effective in 2007 and even prior to that. Our Shark River Slough flow pattern hasn't been a whole lot of flow during this period I'm reporting, and even since the fall of 2018, most of that flow has been through 333. A slide later on will break down how much of that was actually passed into Northeast Shark River Slough versus 334 around to South Dade. The yellow on here represents the 356 pumping that occurred during this period. Just started back up in June, and but that carried into the July period through the end of the water year pretty significantly. Oops. Again, showing each structure breakdown of flow on this slide. These are the S12 A through D. Not too much there for this recent period. 333 carried most of that flow. This slide, you can see stacked. This is the water going into the canal, the L29 canal that borders the Tamiami Trail bridging and Northeast Shark River Slough. So this is the water that has potential to go to Northeast Shark River Slough. And this orange line down towards the bottom represents the portion of that flow that is then pass through 334, and instead of going, so anything above that orange line is what is going to, from that canal into Northeast Shark River Slough. So about 90% of the flow into the canal system for this period, the second quarter, was through 333. Then the following slide shows our sampling events that really represent how the flow aid mean is computed. Over time, we have the bars representing the flow to Shark River Slough on a particular biweekly sampling date. And, you know, there's notably low flow during this period. There are a couple higher flows periods, and I think I can show my laser pointer where in March, early March, we had a day that had a little higher concentration, up around 17, and then I believe it was 19 parts per billion at the end of June where we had flow. So that factors into our water year 2019 calculation in the end. You can see over the last 3 years those same sampling events and then how it's influenced the 12-month moving flow aid mean concentration. Okay. So I'm going to move on to Taylor Slough Coastal Basins. Again, 12-month tracking ending April, May, June. We have 3 methods being used here and reported, with the G737 structure added, the S328 structure being utilized, and also method 3 factors in the 332DX1, which can pass water to the north detention area. I would say, you know, we're at 6.2 to 6.3 here for method 1. I'll show on subsequent slides that was heavily influenced by Irma event. That was September 2018. So as we go to the next quarter and that event drops off, the flow aid mean concentrations are going to get significantly better. But these are, you know, much lower than the 11 part per billion long-term level. Or limit. Our history of annual results through 2018 on the following slide. These are showing the method 1 results in recent years. And 5-year average, we're at 5.2 parts per billion. This is below the expectation from the consent decree of 6 parts per billion. Flow breakdown, 332D dominated much of the flow during the recent periods, with S18C getting some of the larger spikes, I guess, during wetter periods, as would be expected. But there hasn't been, up through June, it was relatively dry, as you can see from all these plots. The individual sites are listed. Didn't get wet enough in the detention area itself to utilize 328 through June of 2019. This is that detention area downstream of S334. So 334 is pumping a lot. Did have a little bit of flow out DX1, but most of that ended up contributing to that higher head area. Not too much. Similar story, low flow. So some of the concentrations we do have seen that historically. When we have little flow, the concentrations tend to go up, but then we typically have higher flow periods that offset that. So this period, I said, was influenced by Irma. That's that one tall spike of flow here in early September of 2018, and there was a relatively high concentration, 15 or so, associated with that. So that's influencing our numbers at this point, but for the water year, that won't be included. And here's those individual sampling events combined with the 12-month moving average, rolling average, or flow weighted mean at this point. So once this drops out, we'll see the overall 12-month drop as well. So that's what I have today. Do we have any questions?
This is Donato. During our last meeting, we discussed incorporating visuals for the 328 and the G737. We talked just briefly after the meeting. I guess I should have followed up a little more. So should we just set a meeting to figure out how to get that presented in this forum? Or?
Yeah, my understanding is you're asking for these slides where we present method 1 to be either reproduced for the other methods or overlaid with other methods. Is that
the overlay is probably I don't know if that's going to work, yeah. But some approach. I don't want to make it excessively long, but something so we can actually see the influence of the other two structures as well.
we can, I guess you can discuss how you want to approach it. I could, if you want to provide me with an example of what you're looking for, or is this going to be something that is narrowed down soon enough, or this would be, I guess, these are some of the questions I have. Would it be part of the standard information that's included in the quarterly report and the presentations, or would this be additional information?
So my understanding is right now we're in the process of evaluating the methods to figure out which one we're going to go forward with in the future. So it seems like we need to be seeing the information so we could actually make those evaluations. Obviously, I'm doing that on my own back in my office, but in this report, in this presentation, it seems like that needs to be presented as well, so the rest of the people who are consuming this information have the opportunity to get the same type of evaluation going on. So I think it's something that needs to be incorporated. How we do that, I think we need to discuss that.
Are you guys okay with discussing that offline and bringing it to the next
Yeah, that's
meeting?
what I was proposing. Maybe we have a separate meeting that we sit and talk about.
Sure, we can discuss it, and I'll follow up with a little communication. Sure.
Okay. Other comments and questions for John on this material?
Hey, Julie, it's Frank. John, for slide 13, do you mind going back to that one real quick, sir?
All right.
So I'm noticing a very tight grouping of sampling concentrations, starting from last water year to about March or April of last water year. And then it kind of loses that pattern and gets really scattered. Do we do we have an understanding of that scattering process? And I've got a second question on top of that is, what was the gate height at, or what was the stage at the 333 during this time period? Was it above or below like the 9.0 NGVD or above the headwater stage?
Sure, give me 1 second to grab one other piece of material and I'll answer that.
Sure.
And Frank, I did want to mention too, back on slide 12, where during that latter period, we're showing lower flows. That might explain a little bit of the scatter.
Right, so I guess first, I would also, yeah, so the previous slide has, so these yellow dots on slide 12 are the same as the blue or cyan on 13, and even though stage is not shown on slide number 12, often we can infer a relationship between the flow and the stage. When we have higher stages, we have flow, at least historically. That is often the case. So these periods where we see the scatter in concentrations that you observed in the past, there was little to no flow. And actually in, let's see, I have this, I don't have stages for previous water years, but this water year I have stages back to October of 2018, which is right about where my cursor is. And we entered the water year with stages relatively low, about 9.5. And by about, well, you cited 9.2, so I think the first time we reached the stage of 9.2 was in January, right about this point, and with stages falling, and we went up and down a little bit, but you know, this generally is associated with lower flow periods and lower stages. We're not, you know, we haven't been presenting stage along with this information because we've in the past stuck with what the compliance is based on, which is flow. So I guess that would be a something to further explain that we've shown in our, you know, for our 2014 exceedance and 2017 exceedance. That was part of the materials that were presented at that time. And probably get into that conversation more today with Jim's presentation on COP. You have some follow-up on that, Frank?
No, and thank you, John. I appreciate it. And I'll wait for Jim Riley's presentation on COP, and maybe we'll have a discussion at that point. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Frank. Other comments and questions for John? All right, thank you so much. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the Combined Operational Plan. Jim Riley from the Corps is going to present on the water quality evaluation and recommendations. So thanks, Jim.
Hi, Jim Riley here, Corps. I'm going to be presenting an update on the Combined Operational Plan, the water quality analysis. Let's go. So the purpose of the brief is to update the TOC on the Combined Operational Plan that will potentially affect water quality, deliveries to the Shark River Slough. The TOC was briefed previously back in October 2018 on the analysis methodology. The water quality analysis performed for the preferred COP alternative identified potential water quality concerns for the Northeast Shark River Slough inflows. The group worked to develop sensitivity runs and scenarios developed to investigate what we could do to address the potential water quality concerns for the Northeast Shark River Slough. Jumping ahead, but I'm going to say it a couple times, I believe we were successful in demonstrating there are things we can do to help address the concerns, the potential water quality concerns that are potentially presented by the implementation of the preferred alternative. Okay, the adaptive management measures that we looked into and analyzed, they're only expected to be necessary until restoration strategies in the Central Everglades Planning Project, SEP, features are completed and delivering additional water to the Northeast Shark River Slough. And we will only intend to use the adaptive management measures only when the conditions warrant. And this is just a graphic, for those who want to go back and look at this later, in the slides, that shows the two areas that we are developing a combined operational plan for. You got the features for the main features that deliver water to the Northeast Shark River Slough, the 12s, which are over here, 333, 356, 355 A and B. Those are the primary features that move water into the Northeast Shark River Slough. And then we got the Taylor Slough Coastal Basin features as well, which is completed 2018. So that's the purpose of those graphics. So this is just to kind of go over what the objectives of COP are in the preferred plan, ALTQ+. That's our preferred plan. Purpose of COP was to improve water quality deliveries into the park and take steps to restore natural conditions, hydrologic conditions in the ENP, given what we have now. It's based on what we have now, not stuff what is going to be built 10 years from now, or 15 years from now, or 8 years from now. So when we implement it, it's going to be what's available, what's on the ground at the time. Just some high points. It used a new COP Tamiami Trail flow formula. It adjusts the volume of water discharged to the park to minimize effects of too much or too little. And the big point is average annual inflows were increased by 162,000 acre-feet, 28%. That's a nice bump. Restore Northeast Shark River Slough is a functional component of the Everglades hydrologic system. That's the location where we want to move the water to. They want to shift more water to the east. That's the ecological target. And that was increased from 58%, what's delivered to the Northeast Shark River Slough, to 77%. There was some benefit to increasing flow to the Taylor Slough. It was about an increase of 7%, Panhandle about 27%. Another COP objective is to protect the intrinsic ecological values associated with 3A in the park. And we want to minimize damaging freshwater flows to Manatee Bay, Barnes Sound through the S197. And primary way to do that is to reduce the uses of S197. And with the preferred plan, they were able to reduce the annual discharges via the S197 by 69%. We also want to include, as part of the COP objectives, consider the cultural values and tribal interests and concerns within 3A and the park. Okay, this is an overview description of ALTQ+. It's basically, as I said, a full utilization of the completed mod water features, what's completed and available to us, C111 South Dade, and the other available comprehensive Everglades restoration SERP projects. It would include the use of the revised Tamiami Trail formula, which was to improve flows to the park based on ecological restoration stage targets. raise the L29 to 8.5 feet. You know, currently the constraint is 90 days per year until we have more data available to demonstrate that we're not damaging the road base. That's an ongoing exercise where they're gathering data right now. Okay, and then we want to eliminate the regulatory releases from 3A to South Dade, which they did, I think, pretty successfully, except during extreme high water levels in 3A. And also, it addresses the deliveries of, from the L30 and the water control area 3B to Taylor Slough and Rocket Glades. The levels were lowered in the South Dade Canal levels, consistent with the incremental field test. It was about 0.2 to 0.3 feet lower versus the 2002 25-15 levels. With the full usage of the completed C11 detention areas allowed us to do that. Okay, continued description of ALT-Q+, the preferred plan. We reduced discharges at S197, and it was modeled with the regional system model, RSMGL, and the Q+ included the criteria that was evaluated in the sensitivity runs for the water quality concerns. So the COP water control plan includes flexibility and adaptive management for Tammany Trail flow formula and water quality. Okay, overview of what were we doing with water quality for COP? What were we looking at? Well, to set the table, water quality improvement is not an authorized purpose for Central and Southern Florida as modified by ModWater C111. So therefore, water quality was not considered in the formulation of the selected alternative. Alternative Q+, the preferred alternative, was not specifically analyzed for water quality, but the operational differences between ALT-Q and ALT-Q+, essentially it is the same flows delivered to the Northeast Shark River Slough, timing and volume deliveries. So the water quality analysis was, it's same old, same old. It was appropriate and applicable. The modeling of ALT-Q showed a potential increase in flow-weighted mean phosphorus delivered to the Northeast Shark River Slough as compared to the existing baseline condition, ECB 19RR, under 2018 conditions. So, there was a potential concern there, so we looked into what we could do to mitigate and reduce concerns. And adaptive management strategies were developed to address those concerns. The sensitivity runs developed and have analyzed, for COP, indicated we could mitigate, decrease the concerns for the water delivered to Northeast Shark River Slough with a modeling showing that we would match the flow-weighted mean. It would be equal to the ECB or improved by 2023. So the primary drivers of water quality delivered to the park is the stage conditions in the upstream water body in 3A. If 3A gets dried out and it gets re-wetted, we have mobilization and we have pulses of nutrients. And another thing we have control over is the location at where the water is delivered to the park, because some of the structures have more canal influence, like 333, S12D, versus like 12C and 12B. They have more marsh influence, so the water quality tends to be better. So the sensitivity runs were developed for water quality to temporary shift flows delivered to the Northeast Shark River Slough from structures with, using structures that had lower phosphorus concentrations. Like specifically, we're shifting some water from 12D to 12C. The other objective was to reduce the duration of dryout conditions in the upstream water conservation area by slowing releases from water conservation 3A towards the end of the wet season. And just so you know, there was no reductions in volumes delivered to the park. There was just a shift in release points and timing of deliveries. So if we delayed any deliveries, they were made up later in the water year. So there was no net reduction of flows delivered to the park. This is a description of what we did for the final water quality analysis in round 3. ALTO was analyzed, and the 2 sensitivity runs that were developed to address the potential water quality concerns. Sensitivity run Q2 that had a minimum flow of 150 CFS, and we deferred releases to 12D and 3 through 3, primarily in the late dry season and the early wet season, the dry years, when we typically have phosphorus spikes under those conditions. And sensitivity run Q3, which had a minimum flow of 150 CFS during certain times of the year, certain conditions, and it reduced dry season recession rates in 3A to reduce frequency of low stage conditions associated with phosphorus spikes in dry years. Each of the sensitivity runs shifted 25% of the flows through the 12D to the 12C. And once again, I'm saying there was no net impact on the average total inflows to Northeast Shark River Slough as a whole. If they delayed anything or there was any shifting, it was the net volume was made up by the end of the year, end of the water year. Okay, in general, there's been an improvement in water quality delivered to 3A in the park, and 3A is the source of water delivered to the park. And I'm going to show you some slides that will demonstrate what's been going on you can see the improvement trend. This trend is independent of restoration strategies and implementation of the SEP South features. Upon the successful completion and implementation of restoration strategies in the SEP South features, SEP North features, and after additional flows are delivered to the Water Conservation Area 3A, it's expected the trend in water quality improvement, which you will see on these next 2 slides, will improve even more over the current trend. Due to this positive direction in water quality, which is independent of the restoration strategies and SEP South features, 2018 and 23 years were modeled so we could see the impact of this improving trend. Here you can see, here's long-term trends developed by Dr. Bill Walker for the long-term trends of what's delivered to Water Conservation Area 3A. You can see there's an improvement trend. And then this is a slide which I mislabeled as 3A. It should be in long-term trends into ENP inflow. And that's the water delivered to the park. And you can see there's also an improvement trend. And that's due to all the large amounts of money and effort, that's been put forth by the Water Management District and the DEP and, whoever else is working on improving the upstream water quality conditions. So we're seeing the benefits of it. And this is just a curve to show that one of the targets, one of the factors we're looking at is we did not want to make it worsen the stage conditions in the Northeast Shark River Slough. And you can see from here that it was the 2 water quality sensitivity runs had better stage performance than the baseline. Both SRQ2 and SRQ3, they were both better than the baseline. That's the purpose of this slide. And this is just a lot of the details. I'm not going to go into it, but if you want to, you can review it, at your leisure. I mean, red is bad relative to the baseline. Blue is an improvement. And you can see down here, let me see if I can get that. There's the mouse. Okay. Down here in sensitivity runs Q2 and Q3, you can see that we have blue numbers for the long-term flow-weighted mean. So the modeling would indicate we will be better than the long-term flow-weighted mean. And you can see we would be equal to the flow-weighted mean for that given year as compared to the baseline. And we also have an improvement of phosphorus delivered at a load above 8 part per billion. So this is a reflection of the sensitivity runs and the improvement in the long-term trends that we talked about previously. Okay, key points and recommendations for the preferred plan, ALTQ plus. The water quality performance differences is small relative to the modeling uncertainties, and random year-to-year variability is captured by some of the hidden slides you can see if you want to look at the end. More detail than you probably want to get into. This is a modeling. The best use of this modeling is it's used as a comparison between the different alternatives to show trends, and I believe it's a valid use of the modeling tool. But I mean, the expectation shouldn't be that this is going to predict exactly. It's going to be 8.1 parts per billion or whatever. It's for a comparison tool to show how we can improve things and how the adaptive management measures could address our water quality concerns. Okay, and as I stated before, the difference between the preferred alternative and the sensitivity run scenarios are going to likely to decrease over time during the long-term water quality improvement trend and the additional water quality improvement expected once restoration strategies and SEP features are completed. So what I'm saying is, once all the restoration strategies and the SEP features are completed, our potential water quality concerns, they should be as much diminished. And I hope they'll be completely gone, and there'll be no restrictions or concerns with how we operate the system. Let me think. And as I said, ALTQ plus is the base operating scenario, and we'd implement the adaptive management measures as necessary when conditions warranted. And the exact method of how we're going to do the paperwork and how we're going to put it in the water control plan of how to implement these management measures is still being finalized. So the way to do that is, this is how I'm viewing it right now, is how we would do it, is we would have some criteria that would trigger a water quality group to have a discussion to make a determination what would be appropriate to implement to address the water quality concerns. And that would include members of the tribe would be invited, DEP, Water Management District, FDAX, DOI, and other agencies with interest or input on water quality. And then we would have it in a larger group setting meeting once we came to some recommendations to provide to the larger group, which probably at the periodic scientist meeting. And we will continue to consider water quality input in making operational decisions. So that's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Jim. I'm sure there will be comments and questions. I know we've got some technical staff here in the room and maybe a couple of folks on the phone. I was wondering if the federal reps and your technical staff have any additional comments or anything about COP? For those of you on the phone not looking, I'm getting a head shake here. We've got a couple of folks in the audience here. I don't know if you guys want to make comments. John, you've been a member of the water quality discussion, I think, on COP. Maybe you have some additional statements or comments you'd like to make. Thanks.
Yes, I mean, really, I want to recognize the efforts that our federal partners have gone through in this COP process, and just want to kind of clarify our understanding and make sure we're on the same page. So, you know, we're also in support of moving water south and enabling features and operations that can get water to Northeast Shark River Slough, Taylor Slough, Florida Bay. And so some of this, I think, is just restating kind of what some of the things that Jim said in his presentation, but throughout the process, you know, we've kind of been in step with the Corps on a number of things, including, you know, our understanding of why this actually had to be evaluated in the first place. So we know that the new water from the north is not considered under this process, but it is bringing more water to Shark River Slough overall on the average volume basis. And it's moving more of that water through 333 and the canal system. And a lot of that water is coming during lower stage conditions, which I think Frank had alluded to a little earlier in looking at the data we've seen. So we all know some of those factors have in the past produced higher TP going into Shark River Slough from localized effects. And so, you know, that's why we kind of took on this effort to see, well, understand better what the data is telling us from the past and what might be able to be done in the future. So those, you know, totally agree, the flows into conservation area and Shark River Slough, the concentrations have decreased significantly over time when we look at the long term. And, you know, COP's looking to use the features that are in place to move more water. So at the same time, I think we all recognize that the physical system that was assumed to be in place for promoting marsh-only flow to Shark River Slough is not yet complete. So, you know, at this point in time, you know, maybe safe to say that an exceedance, a technical exceedance of may not be a reason to just cause too much alarm at this point in time, as long as we stay in that low concentration range and we're not seeing downstream geochemical effects in those downstream areas. And it seemed like we heard some encouraging information at SISREP, you know, some other venues where the monitoring is going on downstream, and despite some of the systems burps of higher TP for short periods of time, that it seems like we're not seeing detrimental effects downstream from what I could understand. So COP's Alt-Q, well, it's improving the flows to ENP consistent with its objectives, would more frequently cause stage conditions and put flow in a direction that could, because in the past we've seen associated with more localized increases in TP, could contribute to technical exceedances in the future. So I guess at this point, the uncertainties that and challenges still ahead that I see for the Corps are getting more defined the process for implementing the adaptive management protocols for water quality, as those are kind of still informal at this point. And, you know, there's an uncertainty with knowing how effective any of these adaptive management measures will be in the new regime of operations in controlling phosphorus levels to northeast Shark River Slough, or Shark River Slough in general. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I would like to add, you know, John mentions about the adaptive management protocols, and maybe the details aren't all quite fleshed out. And I know you said like a bazillion times, Jim, that there's not going to be any less flows to the park, but I'm not sure this adaptive management operating for water quality is fleshed out enough for me to understand that there really won't be less flows to the park. It looks, and if the flows are going to be delivered as desired, since you're talking about shifting structures a little bit from like 12D to 12C. So I would look forward to maybe seeing some more details on your adaptive management protocols.
Well, right now, Julie, the concept is we're going to have some stage triggers and some conditions that would trigger the consideration of the adaptive management measures. We've had discussions, and there's probably going to be a range of conditions because there's, you know, we kind of got it narrowed down for some of the stage constraints for 333 headwater and the 3 gauge average and water concentration for 3A. So we just got to define that, probably have another water quality group meeting and, you know, put that in writing.
Okay.
And just because the conditions exist doesn't necessarily mean that we would want to implement the adaptive management measures. It would be we'd want to consider them because we got to look at long-term, you know, what is the weather forecast, whatever else is going on in the system.
It's going to be interesting to manage that. I did have one question, just out of personal curiosity and all the modeling and everything. Did anybody look at how often the limit at Shark River Slough is going to be 7.6?
Say again?
Did it, in the various modeling efforts, did anybody look at how often the limit at Shark River Slough is actually going to be 7.6? Is that going to end up being most of the time, or?
For the short term under COP, I think that was analysis was done, but I'd have to check with Bill Walker.
Okay.
But we don't have all the parts in place. We're not there yet. We need SEP, we need SEP North, we need SEP South, we need restoration strategies. And then I think our concerns about water quality will be significantly diminished. Hopefully they'll be gone. Any questions?
Yeah, Jim, this is Dan. I just want to chime in and, you know, commend you for bringing this information to the T.O.C. I think that, you know, the adaptive management plan for COP and the water control plan were really just kind of coming together within the last 3 to 4 weeks. So like Jim said, there's still some massaging of the adaptive management, you know, details that needs to be worked out. The schedule we're looking at right now won't have the environmental impact statement out for public review until early February. So there is still time to continue to work through these details, and technical reviews with our state and federal partners are coming up here end of the month and into December. So there's still time to work through these details, but we wanted to make sure we were proactive and brought this information. Since the T.O.C. meetings are quarterly, we didn't think we could wait until January, February time if we wanted to bring it to what we had now.
Okay, thanks. And Jim just said something that kind of piqued my curiosity again. So the modeling and everything assumes no restoration strategies and SEP going forward, but yet you're still putting out there that once those are completed, the water quality will be better. So I just...
Yep.
Okay, Frank or DEP technical folks, you guys have comments, questions?
Hey, Julie, thank you very much. And obviously, this is Frank. I apologize. I lost you for a second there. We're back on. So my question is for Jim. Specifically, I think it may be slide 5 or 6 when it talks about the description of the preferred ALT-Q+, and it speaks of the L29 maximum stage limit of 8.5 NGVD, and it's a 90-day criteria. I'm aware of that criteria, but I'm also aware that the 7 miles of Tamiami Trail is going to be raised within the next 2 or 3 years, along with the bridges that are already complete. So can you walk me through if the model actually took that into account, that this constraint will not be a constraint within hopefully 2 or 3 years, and how does that affect the model?
Okay, so, all right, I got the slides working. So which slide are we looking at? We're looking at
6.
So Frank, sorry, this is Dan. I'll take a first stab at your question as the COP engineering lead for the Corps. I'll put that hat on for a second. COP, the goal of all of the formulation and modeling we did for COP is that we have a plan that is implementable on the day we sign the record of decision. So we're looking at what infrastructure will be in place as of July, August of 2020. That's the basis for all the modeling and formulation of COP. So as of July, August 2020, there is a 2.6 mile western bridge, there is a 1 mile eastern bridge, and the roadway is only allowed to accommodate water levels up to 8.5 feet. So all of the evaluations that were done for COP are based on what infrastructure will be in the ground when COP is implemented. We fully acknowledge that there will be a need to have a new water control plan update that accommodates and makes full utilization of the Department of Interior, Florida Department of Transportation efforts to elevate the Tamiami Trail roadway. And more than likely, not only to accommodate the roadway, but also consider other features that may be available on that same timeline, such as the LACO system operating manual that's slated to be done in 2022 as well. And that would more than likely bring more flows to the southern end of the system. So there's an acknowledgement that there will need to be a subsequent water control plan update after COP that considers both additional inflows that we would expect to come in, as well as making utilization of the elevated Tamiami Trail roadway. But none of those evaluations were included in the COP process.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. So my second question is, Jim, you alluded to the discussion of a water quality team discussion through the implementation of COP when COP is actually implemented. Do you envision that be similar to what Lake Okeechobee has during the periodic scientist calls that occur on a weekly basis? Or do you guys have any type of idea of what that would look like and how the department would be engaged on that discussion?
I'm envisioning it would be like a small group meeting, including DEP. And then we would come up with some recommendations and ideas and then bring it to the periodic scientist meeting for Water Conservation Area 3A. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
so it'll be, when
appreciate
conditions,
that.
we'll be tracking, we've been tracking, the Water Management District has been providing us the preliminary water quality data. And we all know, the people that are tracking water quality, there's certain conditions and certain times of year when, there's more concern with water quality. So as needed, depending on the conditions, then we will start having meetings. They might be weekly. It depends on what the conditions warrant. So we have the small group meeting, get the water quality people, figure out what we think is a good idea to move forward in terms of implementing the adaptive management strategies, and then we would bring it to a larger group. I'm thinking the periodic scientist group for Water Conservation at 3A, just so we can socialize it and get feedback.
Right. Okay. Thank you for the clarification, Jen. I appreciate it.
And now I have another question. I'm just curious, the meetings, how responsive you guys are expecting this adaptive management team to be? Are we talking about weeks, months? What are we doing next month? What are we doing tomorrow? Are you thinking that this group is going to be able to make recommendations fairly quickly if needed?
That's the hope. Yeah, it's going to be dependent on conditions. We don't have approval to implement the adaptive management yet. We have to have a record of decision. That's going to be in August of 2020. So, we try to communicate, but right now we have limited flexibility with what we can do in terms of adapting our operations to water quality concerns under the current NEPA.
Okay, thanks. Anything else for Jim? I'll appreciate all your efforts in bringing all of this to our attention. Thank you. Okay. Our next agenda item is compliance methodologies for Shark River Slough and Taylor Slough and coastal basins under Appendix A. And Donato brought this up, and I've got your email here, but maybe you could explain your objective in asking for this.
So my overall objective is basically to reconvene the Appendix A sub-team. We've had multiple metrics that we've been evaluating for particularly Shark River Slough at this time, and obviously for Taylor Slough as well. But the focus right now is for Shark River Slough. We had envisioned that we would be doing about 2 years worth of data collection. And most of this discussion has been going on since through 2016 as a sub-team for T.O.C. called the Appendix A sub-team. The idea was that we were going to be incorporating Structure S356, which recycles water from Everglades National Park back into Everglades National Park. And we needed to evaluate how we were going to incorporate that into compliance methodologies. So we've done that. We've come up with a couple of methods. We've been applying them. They first appeared in the T.O.C. records back in 2016. And so we've been evaluating them since the July and September 2016 report. So it seems like we have enough data now to actually evaluate if you guys are ready to close this out and come down to one specific metric instead of reporting multiple metrics continuously, indefinitely. So again, my idea is basically to see if we can come back to the table for Appendix A sub-team. We have gone to our principals to discuss this, and it sounded like the principals for the federal and the state side were in agreement to at least have this discussed at the T.O.C. So now I think it's up to the technical to see if we can get back together and reconvene Appendix A and close this topic out.
Okay, comments? Anybody? I know I'd like to get a little more direction from my principal on that and come back maybe at the next meeting. Frank?
Julie, this is Frank. So yes, ma'am, that's the, I was able to speak with my principal prior to this meeting, and he does not have an issue with reconvening the sub-team. And I say, but I am aware that there's a principals meeting, I believe in December, that this topic needs to be brought to the principals. And from that perspective, I will rely on their guidance and direction of what the purpose of the sub-team and the direction of the sub-team will be utilized for in the future. So I also would kind of wait until we get guidance from the principals for the purpose of the sub-team.
And then I know Donato originally you had coordinated with the federal folks, but you guys are okay with reconvening, or?
Yeah, this is Dan on behalf of the Corps. We are amenable to reconvening. Again, I agree with Frank. I'd like to give our principals the opportunity to discuss it around a round table.
Yeah.
But I think supporting of Donato's position, the Corps of Engineers, budget willing, we're anticipating awarding construction contracts for Central Everglades South features by the end of this fiscal year. And so I think as we start talking about changing the infrastructure that's going to alter the inflow locations and hopefully have more of the sheet flow conditions that were assumed and envisioned with the original consent decree by this time, it would be nice to, before we embark on the conversation about how to deal with new inflow locations, to have put behind us what we're doing with the structures that have been in place and operating for in excess of 4 years at this point, particularly with 356. Sure. I think that, as we implement the COP water control plan next year, certainly it's a good time as well to start the dialogue on the Taylor Slough coastal basins, just to make sure that there's no additional needs from the T.O.C. perspective with respect to water quality monitoring. If there's any items that we would like to include in the COP hydrologic water quality monitoring plan, there's an opportunity to do that between now and implementation of COP. So I think while we don't have enough water quality samples yet for the Taylor Slough coastal basins to maybe be in a position like we are with 356 to maybe make a recommendation from the T.O.C. to our principals on how to handle the compliance calculation. I don't think we're there yet for Taylor Slough, but I think we're in a position where we can at least start looking at the data. I support Donato's position on, finding visual aids to bring that information to both the T.O.C. reps as well as to the public and stakeholders that are tracking this meeting.
Okay, very cool. Rebecca, any comments? You're good with everything? Well, it sounds like we're all pretty much on the same page to maybe get the show on the road here, but we'd also like to get a little additional feedback and guidance from our principals. So I would ask you each to please let your principals know we're expecting them to have that conversation to get us some more guidance. That would be great. Anybody, anything else on that subject? Okay. Let's see, where are we here? We're up to public comment, and I do have a public comment card here from Drew Martin, representing the Sierra Club. Drew, I think the mic on the podium over there is live.
I think it is.
You might need to press the button.
No, it's on.
It's on, okay, thanks.
Okay. I'm actually representing the Loxhatchee group of the Sierra Club, but I am on the Conservation Committee for the state of Florida, Sierra Club, and their water quality team. I want to thank you, first of all, for all your work, and it seems, as a non-technical person, that things seem to be going fairly well. So I hope that's correct. I hope I'm making the correct judgment from the reports that I'm seeing, that the water quality seems to be meeting the standards. Is that correct? Can anybody nod up and down, or?
Yeah, for the most part, although I think before you got here, John mentioned we're looking at a possible excursion at Shark River Slough for the last water year. And we'll know more when the data is finalized.
Okay. I agree that I think there needs to be more plans, which I think is the comments that I'm hearing, to accommodate more water, because I think the plan is to send a lot more water south, and particularly when 3A gets too full. And, we're trying to avoid sending water out to the estuaries. And so we'd like to see, I think that it's pretty much general knowledge, that we'd like to see a lot more water be able to go south. And it sounds like, from what the Army Corps just said, that they haven't really planned for that. In other words, they're only planning for the existing system, but not planning for larger amounts. And so, as a non-technical citizen of the public, I would think that maybe that planning should be taking place now to accommodate larger flows, particularly if there's severe rain events. I know that you're allowed to have some exceptions, but still, it would be nice to be able to have some plans in place so that if you have much larger flows, and also the plan to build the reservoir in the EAA and have more treatment, and also to have more water flowing south, so that they'll start in this process planning for the future, so that you'll be well ready to accommodate that when you have much larger flows. So again, I hope I characterized correctly. I'm not a technical person, so I apologize if I misread the data or get it wrong, but I'm hoping to be optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments in the room? What about on the phone? Do we have any public comments from folks on the phone?
Yes, Julie, this is Melody.
Hi, Melody, how are you?
I'm good. So I have one general comment and two specific ones. For the general comment, it's about COP. I think it's a positive step toward moving and shifting water from the S12 structure to S333, and to see increased flow, increased water flowing into Northeast Shark River Slough. If I have one concern there is, I will echo your concern, Julie, is like how to integrate the water quality control plan within the adaptive management. That's very tricky. And I'm really interested to see what operations would be considered as part of the adaptive management. So I'm looking forward to hear more and to see more about this part. But regardless, with SEP and Blue Shanty, we expect a water quality improvement trend when compared to current conditions. So I'm confident that we will see less exceedances with Blue Shanty and with Back South in place. Now, from a technical perspective, did anyone check what happened for the auto samplers for S333? Like when checking the data in June and July, we see values about 50, 60 parts per billion given by the auto sampler at S333. So I'm just wondering if the district or the feds checked this. And then the second technical comment that I have is the S332D. When checking the water quality there, again, I see an increasing trend. Again, if anyone checked this also.
Okay. First of all, I think we'll have to get back to both of those questions. I do know we noticed the auto sampler data as 333 had gone up somewhat in the summer, but I'm not sure we were ever able to identify a cause.
Okay.
332D. Okay, anything else?
That's it. Thank you very much.
All righty, thank you so much. Anybody else on the phone have comments? Okay, all right. I did want to go to look at some potential future meeting dates, and Violetta and I were able late in the day yesterday to also look at the calendars again. So just want to let you guys know we did reserve some possible quarterly or annual meeting dates for 2020. And then we were able to locate some dates in mid to late January rather than February if folks wanted to try to have a possible quarterly meeting. And those dates were the week of the 13th through 17th. So Tuesday, if Tuesday's still the best day, would be the 14th. The other week that seemed fairly open in here was the 21st through the 24th, and Monday the 20th is a holiday for many folks. So I just wanted to point that out. I don't know if any of these dates are overwhelmingly good or bad for anybody here. You could speak up. We could do a doodle poll a little bit later if you like also.
January 14th is fine with me.
Mr. Barquette?
Yeah, this is John Barker. I didn't know if someone was talking. In January, that the first dates you mentioned would work the second week, the week of Martin Luther King's holiday. It would not work.
Okay, and Donato was interested in the 14th of January also, is that right? Is that what I just heard? Yeah. How about you guys?
This is Dan from the Corps. I'm good with any of the 4 dates that are being proposed.
Okay.
Yeah, we're flexible as well.
Okay, great, thanks. We were, I can't remember why we ended up in February, but we did want to try to push it back a little bit closer to a little more normal of a quarterly schedule. Well, why don't we plan on a possible quarterly meeting on the 14th of January, and we can go from there as we get a little more information and get our materials and agenda together. I would ask you guys, we're going to try really hard to work fairly well in advance on agenda setting so that we can get materials posted on the webpage fairly early on in the process so folks can have a look at things. So we'll be wanting to work in December to get this January agenda firmed up. Okay. Anybody have anything else for today? I think that's it. It's not really 12:30. They didn't change that clock back there, but I think this ends our quarterly meeting for today, and I really appreciate everybody's participation.
Thanks, everyone. Jim, thanks for that presentation. It was really good.
Thank you. Thank you.